Joining me today is an actor, a producer, a director, and a good old-fashioned liberal, Mark Duplass. Welcome to the Rubin Report.
Thanks for having me.
I'm really looking forward to this because I feel like destiny has put us here.
How's that?
Old-fashioned liberals willing to have a conversation.
Yes.
We're sort of a dying breed here. I think there are more of us than we think.
Probably.
But they've kind of been silenced or quiet or something. But before we get into all that stuff, let's just do a little bit of your history and your work and stuff like that, because we're going to go mostly into politics.
Great.
So, in terms of your work, what do you want people to know about you most? And you just said to me, we don't have to do much of that promotion.
Yeah,
but for someone tuning in that doesn't know who you are.
Yeah, I mean, I think I got my start in independent film, and I was making like little $3 movies with my brother, and started out at the Sundance Film Festival, and I really was just like a kid from the suburbs who didn't know what he was doing, and we ended up kind of building this career kind of brick by brick. You know, our first feature was a $15,000 movie, and then I kind of made my way into Hollywood eventually, and I kind of have one foot in the Hollywood system where I work as a writer and an actor, and I have one foot outside where I continue to produce and make my own movies, and you know, I've been in shows like The League, where a lot of people would know me from, and I ran a show for HBO called Togetherness for a while, and you know, basically I'm sort of like trying to find a way to be exactly who I want to be creatively inside of the Hollywood system without drowning inside of it.
Yeah, and I mean, my audience knows that I find that concept fascinating because I've sort of bounced around from some kind of mainstream stuff to online stuff to now owning what I do. And even for you, that's a little more entrenched in the Hollywood system, that you're trying to figure out your way. It's pretty cool, and I've read some articles where you talk about that. Just how do I build what I want and own it and feel good about it? That's the challenge.
It is a real challenge, and you know, the industry continues to change, and you know, it's a lot like our world right now. You know, like for whatever reason, you know, I'm headed towards this place of ownership where I feel like the only way for me to do exactly what I want to do creatively, maintain not only creative control, but honestly control the environments in which I work with really nice people, be able to support young people. My brother and I are big on like mentoring young talent as producers and raising them up. And studios just don't want that. They want a proven talent, you know? Yeah. And so I always thought my career was going to be start at film festivals, start independently, and that will be a stepping stone to get to Hollywood. And once I get to Hollywood, I'm going to be set.
Right.
And then I got here in my late 20s, and I was like, I'm set, I'm here. I don't like this. Yeah. This is really weird. And strangely enough, choosing independence and choosing ownership has not only been better for me creatively, but it's actually been a lot better financially in the long run. You know, so we're now in this weird spot where we're kind of like running our own production on all of our own TV shows and movies. We kind of work in television. My brother works in Transparent. I work in, you know, like The League and things like that. And I make money there, and I fund my own stuff. And we're like our own little studio, you know, which is funny to me because, you know, I always joke how I really am as liberal as they come when you look at me on paper, except when you look at what I've done from a business perspective, I am at the very least a fiscal conservative, but probably more libertarian than anything else, where I'm just like, you know, if you look at Hollywood as government, you know, where I'm just like, get away, I don't want you in my face, let me do my thing, I know what I'm doing, I'll handle it myself. You know, that is a very conflicting thing with a lot of my liberal philosophies and all that. You know?
Isn't that interesting though? Because that's sort of where the rubber meets the road. It's like you have this idea, now you've built something, and you go, wait a minute, I either want to keep what I've earned, or I want to spend it the way I feel is right, or any of that stuff. And that's where your ideas actually get challenged.
It's 100%. I look at you know, a Hollywood production, and I see waste everywhere. You know, I'm just like, you are spending on catering, one day's catering for a Marvel movie, what I spend on a whole movie. Yeah, you know,
literally, you're not making that up. I mean, the amount of money that's tossed around there.
And that drives me insane. And I understand how conservatives look at government a lot of times, and they're like, this makes me insane. The inefficiency makes me insane. So I'd rather just get rid of the whole thing. You know, and so I get that. And,
I know we don't have a whole craft services thing for you in the green room, but I thought our snacks were okay. Fiji water, or Fuji water.
The coffee was at least a 6 out of 10. So that's
Nespresso, man.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
That's the good stuff.
That's the good stuff.
That's the good stuff. All right. Well, we could. I'm going to ask you a little more about Hollywood at the end
Sure.
because it kind of relates to all the politics. But politics is kind of how we got here. I saw
Absolutely.
you on Steven Crowder, and he's a buddy of mine, and we have all our political differences, and we put those aside to come and talk. And that's exactly what you did on his show. And immediately after on Twitter, everyone's like, "Dave, you got to get this guy. There's another one of you. There's another liberal."
You were the first one that everybody said. As soon as
Yeah.
I went on Crowder, they're all like, "You got to go see Rubin."
All right, so here we are. So first, let's just talk about growing up, because you mentioned this on Crowder, and we spoke about it earlier. You grew up in a Reagan household in the South.
100%.
Tell me about that.
I grew up in New Orleans, grew up in the suburbs. You know, my grandfather was, ninth grade education, built his laundry cleaner's business by himself, pretty much. Sure, he stole some money to do it. Like we were that.
You gotta do what you gotta do.
Gotta do what you gotta do. We were that self-made family. My dad was the first guy to go to college. Went, became a lawyer, and we were this family that was like in-group, out-group mentality. Like, talk about like the America First attitude. We were just Duplass first. Like we are in our home. We're finally financially sustainable here. We've moved into the middle class. And Reagan was God in our house. It was just like, here we go. Like, let's cut these taxes. Let's take care of it. Trickle down economics is going to work for us. And I guess you could call that fiscal conservatism, but realizing the value of a dollar, realizing that like if I can just get my arms around my own business and run it my own way, we can do it. And my father worked at a big law firm. He split off when he was 30. When we were very young, took the chance, started his own firm with his own money, invested in it, and built his thing. And I have always looked to that model and thought, that feels very, very right to me, in my core, and I guess, like I said, it's very...
It sounds like exactly what you're doing with yourself right now.
It is what I have done in the film business, and I really followed those footsteps, and I didn't think about it until I've started to think a little bit more politically, and I started to actively look for connection points, between liberals and conservatives, libertarians. I started asking myself those questions, and I started saying, well, what do you share? What makes you not the classic elitist Hollywood libtard that everyone thinks you are?
Right.
And I was like,
we'll talk about those people.
Here's
in just
one.
A second.
Here's one thing. And it's been interesting to me because the more I talk about that with conservatives, they're like, yeah, that's me. I look at the government the way you're looking at Hollywood. Same thing.
Yeah. So a lot of this, you're sort of awakening to this, or this sort of last couple of months where you've kind of been reaching out to the other side and trying to figure out what people think and all that. It has a lot to do with Election Day, right?
Yeah, Election Day was big for me. I've been not very politically involved my whole life. I've been very self-oriented, self-involved in terms of like, how do I become a successful artist? Because this, as you know, you were a stand-up role. It's so hard. It requires all your time and energy. I was very insular focused. Having children got me a little more out of myself, and then the election pulled me way out of myself. And my first reaction, like all of my friends and a lot of liberals out there, was just blind anger and fear, and I was very upset. I felt like we were going to take a lot of steps backwards, and I just started screaming on Twitter, and I was doing it in funny ways with comedy. I was doing it in incendiary ways. I was, admittedly grabbing headlines of things when I wasn't even fully that educated about them, tweeting them out and just being like, this is terrible.
Yeah.
And, while I think that some of those opinions were and still are valid, when I honestly looked at like what the outcome was, I was like, well, that's just chumming me up more closely to people who already believe like I do and creating a further divide from people who don't believe like I do. So I was aware enough and have been to therapy enough to know after a few weeks, like, this is highly not productive. So how can I find a way to channel some of this and do it for good, And look, I don't really hide this. Like, I'm a person who has been through a lot of anxiety in my life, a lot of depression in my life. I've been through therapy for a long time. I've learned how to communicate and deal with very complicated relationships. I work with my wife. I work with my brother, who is also my best friend. My parents live 2 miles from me. We hang out every Sunday with the whole family. And I know, I guess, what it means to be the first one to say you're sorry, even if you think the other person may have done even worse to you, how to step in first. I know what it means to stop looking at what all the differences are, to ferret out connection points, and to try to nurture those things and grow them so that you can start to effectively communicate. That's what I've made my whole life about. I'm lucky enough to be an upper middle class person who didn't have to deal with starvation, so I dealt with relationships. And so when I started thinking about that, I was like, maybe there's a space for me to try to reach out with some of these things that I've learned in the political arena. So I changed my Twitter tactic really to from yelling to sorry about the yelling. Is there something you want to tell me that I don't understand? And the first question I asked, which was, if you held your nose and voted for Trump, I get it. I wasn't on fire for Hillary. It was a little bit of nose holding for me too, I was psyched about having the first female president. She was going to guard my basic policies. I wanted to get the Supreme Court anointee that I thought I could get for her.
Yeah.
It was good. It was working for me, If you looked at Trump in that way, you're a one-issue voter, you're pro-life, or you wanted that Supreme Court justice that he would get for you, Great. If you're on fire for Trump, I don't understand it, so please try to explain this to me. And it was very interesting. By pulling back and not yelling and just by being willing to listen, I got a bunch of really good responses from people saying like, first of all, thank you for just listening.
Just that, right?
That was
just
huge,
that, yeah.
And I was like, oh, I have been here really bummed about these really loud, incendiary, quite frankly, assholes, conservatives who have been tweeting at me, saying these horrible things to me. And I'm like, there's a bunch of people on the left doing that to them too. And I realized how much they appreciated me not doing that. And I was like, oh, they're feeling it too. So we're at least equally guilty on this side of slinging shit at each other, right?
Yeah. So wait, let's pause there for a second.
Yeah.
Because I think what's interesting is, as a guy that lives and works in Hollywood, that for me, and I mentioned to you before, I've only lived in New York and LA. So, I've never lived in the middle of the country, but I think I've been sort of attuned to what they're talking about because I had a few guests on, like Scott Adams, who created Dilbert, and even Milo, who it's a different thing, but was talking about what the people are attracted to in Trump, and a couple other people that I heard it. So when the election happened, I can't say that I was totally shocked.
Yeah.
I was on Joe Rogan's show the day before, and I said, I think it could happen. Like, I really wasn't shocked. Were you completely shocked? Like, how much was the shock related to the lashing out?
100%. I would say that they were part and parcel, and because, look, the policies bother me, and some of the policies still very much bother me, and that's almost beside the point of what I'm trying to do in this space. But I was certain that Hillary would win, and part of that is because I was just not that politically educated, and I was really resting on my laurels. I had 8 great basic years with Obama as far as I was concerned, and I was reading headlines, but I wasn't reading all of the articles, and I was like, we're good, it's good. And so this was a big awakening for me,
Yeah.
And I think that, 8 to 10 years from now, I think there are going to be a lot of people that are going to say, one of the best things that happened in this country was getting Trump elected so that people could wake up and they could start reading deeper into the headlines and start to figure out where we belong. And, I know that when I say something like that, and this is a sensitive subject, and I don't know how to say it correctly, but I know that as an upper middle class white male, I have a certain comfort to be able to say, like, it's time to heal the divide, because there are a lot of people who would just be like, easy for you to say, man, you're not in the direct crosshairs of the policies that this man is trying to enact that could threaten you, So I'm like, I get that, but I can only speak from where I am and what I believe in. And somewhere deep in my gut, I was raised Catholic, I was raised on New Testament stuff, I was raised on Jesus principles, I rejected them all, got away from religion, but the core of being a person for others and the MLK message and the Jesus message of the only way forward is through creating positivity, reaching out, trying to find laughter, and building something out of that. It's what I've learned in my marriage. My wife and I have been together for 15 years. It's basically the best marriage I could have hoped for, but we have our shitty moments.
Yeah.
And when I look at our marriage, and I look at that as a microcosm for the country and the gridlock that's happening, when things get really bad for us, we promise ourselves we're not going to point out our differences anymore. We're going to look for connection points. And a lot of times that is a lowest common denominator connection point. For us, it's the Big Lebowski and a 6-pack of Coors Light.
Yeah.
When we
That'll
get
do
that,
it.
we can sit on the couch together
Yeah.
and not look at each other and enjoy this thing. And
Yeah.
then the good vibes start to come. And then suddenly, like, one of us will be like, you want to order some Chinese food? I'll get it. And then the person, oh, well, that was a generous, nice little move towards me there.
Yeah.
And then Chinese food comes in, it's like, hey, look, I'll put it on the plates for us and I'll bring it out. And then all of a sudden, brick by brick, by not examining the differences, but the things we could share, you get there, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm jumping into something that I'm not fully aware of the consequences. I'm not as well read as I should be on politics to even be on this show. But my goal is to try and find these connection points with people who disagree with me as much as possible, honestly, and
Yeah.
see what we can build.